Welcome. This is a newly elected roundtable. So John Park asked me to facilitate this for those of us who are new council people. I see my city attorney on here, Sean Guzman. He probably wants to make sure I don't say anything wrong or lead you guys astray, which is so super possible. We are going to have a discussion. So I guess the first thing we would ask is that everyone use their video monitor if you're able so that we can see everyone's faces for the discussion, because we're going to have a few questions that we'll do breakout rooms for. And it's just an opportunity. Basically, you know, if we were up at the normal league meetings, we would have an opportunity to network with one another. But because of our situation in 2020, we're going to try to do it this way. We've stepped into something, you know, a hotbed of interesting, and I guess in a lot of ways, I liked what Spencer Cox said this morning. Sometimes these most challenging things can be the things that really push us to grow and learn and become better cities and better people. So I think that is a good way for us to look at it. So I think we still have people joining, but what we will do is we have two initial questions. So we're just going to break out into some chat rooms and discuss these questions and then come back together. It'll be easier for us if we are in smaller spaces to be able to have this discussion. So Meg's sharing the screen with you now so you can see the two questions. And then John Park will break you out into a room and you'll have a discussion about these questions, and then we'll come back together. So what has your experience been working with a team that involves both elected officials and hired city staff? And then do you ever find yourself voting due to the voices of your loudest constituents? And I guess a follow-up to that would be, do you have examples of how your cities like effectively captured the voices of those more marginalized, maybe those more quiet voices? So Meg, the one thing I'm wondering is, are we gonna have each breakout group talk about each question, or will there be an assigned question to the different breakout groups?
So we can do however you like, but if they want to have time, we could maybe give 6 minutes and they can try to discuss both. And if they can't do it, then we can come back. And the questions are also in the chat box. So when you go to your breakout room, you'll have them there again if you forget.
Sounds good. Thanks everyone for attending, and we'll have John break us out into these chat rooms now. And as Meg said, you can go to the chat box and see the questions, and we'll have some discussion and then come back together.
John, before you break everyone into the chat rooms, I just wanted to say hello and welcome to the League Convention. I know we're on day 3 here, but under normal circumstances, we would have had a reception for newly elected mayors and council members and giving you the chance to interact with each other and meet each other, because you're going to be serving alongside each other for the next few years. Obviously, these are normal circumstances, so we're trying to replicate that to some degree here at lunch, but thank you for taking time to join us virtually. We hope we can see you all in person again soon. It was a pleasure to meet many of you at our elected officials essentials trainings back in the winter pre-COVID. And we're grateful for your participation within the league and hope it's been a worthwhile week for you. So thanks everybody, and thanks for being here.
Thanks, Cameron.
I think we can either have Shannon or Max, if you want to pinch hit while Dannielle is getting back online with us. We were just going to have people report back on some of those questions. If either of you two are game to taking on that challenge. Otherwise, we can have one of our staff do it, but if you're up for it.
I can jump in for a quick second. I'll give a quick summary of what we talked about. It felt pretty short, our conversation. We were kind of just getting to know each other, but I think we all found that we were addressing the question of the loudest voice in the room, sort of dominating conversation, and how do we navigate that? And, you know, I think we've all had that experience. Some people mentioned they were, you know, running around the community kind of trying to spark up conversation when they had the opportunity. And maybe to the point where people are shying away from that conversation because they don't want to have it all the time. I know our experience in Park City is we have a lot of vocal people, and And we kind of joke, I think, Megan, you can attest to this. You've been around here long enough that there's like 200, 250 people who are super active, and we're trying to break out of that. So Andy and I have tried to find other local citizens who want to get involved but might be intimidated to come to a meeting. We heard that in our breakout. And just get them involved in the conversation, feed them when there's a meeting, what that meeting might address, and then sort of disseminate that information amongst their peers, so it's not always coming from an elected official. But it's a crash course during COVID, as I know most people on here can attest to. Everybody's got an opinion about the way to go, so there are a lot of loud voices in the room.
So our breakout session also was very short. We talked about the dynamic between staff and elected officials and trying to find the balance of that. And it was interesting that all three of the elected officials had completely different circumstances and experience over the first 9 months. And so I think there's a lot to learn from each other. And I think that's why it's important for us to have these meetings, so that, we sometimes think that our job or our role and our experience as an elected official is everyone's experience, and that's just not the case. And so I think there are things we can learn from each other about trying to be the best representatives that we can.
Well, here's an idea. There's no reason why we can't send you back into a breakout room. Would you guys like to continue conversations again? We certainly have the time. It's your meeting.
Yeah, we didn't even get to the second question. So, I mean, however everyone wants to do it. I mean, I think it was beneficial.
Okay. Should we give that a try? John, our tech, is our wonderful tech today. Is that possible to send them back into the Netherland of rooms again, and we'll...
It absolutely is.
Conversation?
Meg,
Yes.
Meg, before we break out, could I just say one word to staff from the one question we got to, which was the staff interaction with the elected officials? When you all talk about that, just keep in mind one thing, and that is the staff look up to you as elected officials. So even though some of us, like the attorney level, city manager level, we're used to interacting with you calling us for advice or talking to us, the rest of the staff can be intimidated when they get a call from an elected official, or an elected official comes to the office. And I don't think the elected officials realize that sometime. And so the staff feels a little guarded on what they say. And I'd be interested in what John would say on that. And so just keep that in mind. If they seem a little timid or something, it's because they're looking up to you as an elected officials, as their boss. And so sometimes they don't feel as comfortable in talking to you. You can make them feel comfortable in talking to you.
Yeah, well, I agree, Sean. Thank you. I think the only difference is from what you said, is you're not just their boss, but you're their boss's boss. And so sometimes that does occur. So just have patience with staff. And if you need to go back to your city administrator, city manager, and maybe have them involved in the conversation until they get comfortable, might not be a bad way to do things. Thanks, Sean. All right, Meg, let's do our breakouts. Let's do our breakouts.
Is 10 or 15? Any consensus, a thumbs up? Should we try 10, or do you guys think 15 is better?
10 minutes is probably good.
All right. Well, we'll have our tech send us back into rooms for 10 minutes and then bring you all back.
I guess what I would like to hear is from your chat rooms, what did you glean? Are there any stories that you would like to share with the larger group about opportunities that you've had to kind of mitigate that loud voice versus marginalized voice, and to really come to a good consensus and good decision in your community? Would any of you like to share?
Well, we had a pretty popular one in Park City. I'll keep it short. Marcy's already heard this, but we painted Main Street murals, and it was a decision made by executive, and there was a little bit of a lack of transparency there that I think people assumed that there was, even though we followed a similar process that we always did with any piece of art. And we had a vocal minority opposed in the beginning. Then there was some vandalism, and then we had a vocal minority that were for the murals. And so we just started doing a little bit more community outreach. We did some roundtables with the mayor and I, and tried to invite different voices into the room. You can't please everybody, but I think when you start hearing that much noise, you have to honor the noise a little bit, but be careful not to give it a bullhorn when it is a vocal minority. It's hard to figure out exactly who's who, right? And so you really have to be tapped into the community, and that was a very public thrust right into being an elected official.
Thanks for sharing that, Max.
I guess I can piggyback on that, in that the overarching thing is that I think you just have to remember that you represent the entire city. You don't represent the person who emails you the most any more than you represent the little old lady down the street who never, ever contacts the city or anybody at the city. And understanding, I think, that you got to give equal weight to the people who aren't saying anything as well, and making sure that you're not just kind of going down paths with loudest voices, making sure that it's reasonable. And I think the staff can help with that, because what we found, at least in our city, is that we have a very consistent number of people who have been the loudest voices for decades. Mm-hmm. And so as a new council member, it was interesting, like previous gentleman said, to be involved in the community and kind of know where the loud voices are coming from, so you can kind of give weight to whether they represent the full community.
Great discussion. Anybody else want to share?
I'll share. And I'm sorry my camera's not on. I'm in the car. But in Provo, because it's such a large city and there's different groups who care about different issues, right? So some folks just consistently care about biking and bike safety and bike infrastructure. And there's other people who care about masks, and there's other people who care about air quality. But when I've made those connections and have some relationships across these different groups, sometimes I ask different groups what they think about a position or policy from a different group, right? So I texted a friend who's really involved with bikes and asked him what he thought about the mask mandate. Because he's not someone who would write in about masks, he's someone who would write in about bikes, but I wanted to get his perspective, because I think he's a critical thinker. So sometimes cross-pollinating ideas to understand a greater spectrum of community input can be valuable.
That's really great input, Shannon. Anybody else want to share?
Dannielle?
Yes.
I thought the point in our breakout, the point you made about social capital and the flooding was really good. Could you mind sharing that?
We had a situation where we had this flooding happen. And for me as a new council person, what it made me realize instantly is there are those in our community who have social capital, and there are those that do not. So, you know, the people who were immediately really loud and demanding that we fix things were the people who had greater social capital. Everybody got flooded. Like, we had a lot of people who had flooding damage, but the people who, you know, were basically getting their voices heard were the people who lived in these big, expensive houses. And we needed to hear their voices, but we needed to hear everybody's voices. And so that was just a really good lesson for me, because I felt like it was my responsibility as a city council person to reach out to the people that I knew were not being heard.
Hey, Cameron Deal from our executive director would like to just take a minute at this brief interlude.
Yeah, I'm curious to know how you're interacting with your public in the social media era. As I look at the people on the screen, I follow several of you on social media. So Clint and Marcy and Rosalba and Shannon, you know, I follow several of you on Twitter or on Facebook. And so you've talked about how some of your residents have more social political capital than others, or you're hearing from loud residents. I'm curious, especially in the age of COVID, just how many of those conversations are happening online, and if you figured out a productive way to have those conversations online.
I can give you the quick answer from Park City is we've done those roundtables with, so we have a coffee with council every week. And then we also have Friday roundtable that started as an economic recovery roundtable for the mayor and I, right as COVID started. And people can tune in and ask questions. And we went from having 20 people at Coffee with Councils to the mayor and I had Mitt Romney and Ben McAdams on. And we had, by the time we were done, a week and a half after that, there were 7,000 views on it. So we've been reaching a lot more people virtually. So it's actually helped with our outreach there. And we've been able to get back to questions thoughtfully and with the help of staff after those calls. So I feel like we've actually got more engagement since COVID. That's one way we've done it.
As a Park City constituent, I want to thank you for that, because I've actually been more engaged through that, and so have my neighbors. So thank you.
Here in Layton, we've tried to, believe it or not, we're now live streaming our council meetings and other meetings, which is a big deal for us. And as well, and this might be, everybody does this, but new to us, we will send out our packet of information for the community, for the citizens before our meetings, and then recaps of what happened after, which I think it's been great for transparency in our community. And not that there's a lot of engagement from that, but I think that those who are following and those that just maybe scroll through, they're like, oh, okay, they're working. And then when they do have an issue, I feel like they can reach out because we're transparent. And I know you've got Don here, and Zach especially will reach out even more. We try to reach out with what we feel, how things are going from each of the meetings and each of the votes and each of the projects. And it's been great. Now people will reach out to us individually, and I think each of those incidents are, whether you call them or you can talk to them online. It just depends on the situation. But I feel like the more transparent we're trying to be with the information, it's all public information. Why hide anything? The better it is and it gives confidence to the residents that, yeah, they're listening. And if I do have an issue, wow, they're gonna respond.
Can I just add to that? Again, I think most of us are newly elected, which I am as well. But one thing I've tried to do on my social media accounts is twofold, kind of put out information, but also solicit feedback. And so I was sharing, sorry, those who've already heard me share this, but I've tried to just keep it really simple and use a Google form that I can push out and invite people to respond to, and just very open-ended. Here's the facts, and then just inviting people to share their thoughts. I've gotten some good interaction through that for those who do perhaps follow me on Facebook or Twitter. So I use it often to proactively just communicate things that are happening in our city as well as state, county, but also to invite feedback from the community.
Okay, great. Thanks, Marcy. Rosabaugh was going to comment.
Can you guys hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay. Sorry, I was getting feedback that you couldn't, and sometimes that happens. So I use Instagram, I use Facebook. I try to go within our community groups. It depends if there's something going on specifically in my district. I'll just put out some feelers and some comments and really try to elevate our staff and our community as much as possible. I also have a newsletter that we put out. It was meant to come out right when COVID hit. So a lot of it was COVID heavy, and a lot of constituents were not happy about that. But since we've been really busy, what it has done is it's now created an email, I guess, collection of emails for even our staff to follow up with constituents in my district who felt like there was a disconnect. So that's been really helpful. I'm trying to be available as much online as possible. And by doing the social media, I can send out, screenshots of our agenda for the evening that a lot of people didn't have. And especially our younger constituents who are well informed and want to be informed and want to know what's going on. But I try to highlight our city and our staff as much as possible through my messaging, because we do, you know, I want to make sure that they feel included and that they feel like that we're elevating them as well. But I also have to keep in mind, you know, when I was canvassing, I was doing face-to-face, a lot of face-to-face. And the main thing that I kept hearing was our voice is never heard, or we can never get a hold of somebody. So I try to make it I try to be available as much as possible. And if I'm not immediately available, I put my information in for my staff, and they can contact my staff. And if, you know, depending on where I'm at in my day or with the kids or COVID, whatever, I try to make sure somebody follows up with them within 24 to 48 hours immediately. And that's my goal. But that's how I use social media. I do have an upper hand because I am a graphic designer. So sometimes I spend time to make sure it's aesthetically pleasing for them, but that they're reactive as well.
I guess I'll add one thing. One of the things, I think the whole purpose of this is to try to get more people involved in the community to make them feel like that they can make a difference. I mean, when we have nationalization of our local races is not a good thing. We want people to feel like they can come and show up at City Hall and they can make a difference in their communities. And so if their elected officials are giving them all the information that we have, so that they can become more informed, the whole community becomes more informed. And so as has been mentioned, I think some great ideas. What I do is I actually explain every vote that I make in detail. And I have people write me back and say, I think that was a terrible decision, but thank you for sharing it. That's the whole point. It's not that they're going to agree with every decision that we make, but they really respect the transparency of seeing exactly how we got from point A to point B, because then they know in the future that we really take these issues seriously.
Very good. Thanks, Zach. You know, I'm going to put Dave Church on warning a little bit. I'm going to ask him at the end of this, just this is an awesome chance to get his words and wisdom before we leave. But I'd just like to, and we'll do that right at the end, I think, Dave. So I wanted to give you a little warning about calling you out there. We have some other questions that Dannielle has worked with some of the rest of you, but is there any questions or burning questions out there that one of you want to ask at this session and get some feedback from others?
I do. I feel like I got this position because of my use of social media. I reached out a lot and had a lot of input. We have a problem here in Brigham City with that loud negative few kind of being very negative on any of our social media posts, and to the point where we feel like other citizens are kind of being harassed if they do voice of an opinion, and it's caused a lot of hurt feelings. And so I think I've backed off quite a bit on my social media, getting information out there to people, because I don't want to subject other residents to that kind of negativity. Does anybody have any tips on how to handle that? We basically have somebody that will put really horrible stuff on any post that we make.
Great question. Anybody?
Well, we had some pretty negative feedback here in Park City. We have actually kind of got a lot of that. I'm not exactly sure how we address it, other than I know I go to our IT department and they've tried to weed out things. They've also tried to use platforms that are still accessible, but that they have some control over. But I'm not sure what to do on your personal account. That's really, really difficult.
Yeah. I don't want to block every residence that I don't like, because that starts a whole nother thing, but sometimes for the safety and some of the residents of this abuse.
It also depends, right? Like on our position that we can't block everybody.
Yeah.
One thing I've done, because I've gotten some really incredible emails, is, you know, I just thank them for writing me and I acknowledge them, because that's really what it is, right? They want some form of acknowledgement, and just thank them for their opinion. And, you know, depending on where you stand or what the situation is I'm here to serve for all constituents in my district and the city. And, you know, if there's something that's prevalent to my decision making, or I need to hear your voice, or I need to help you with whatever X, Y, and Z in the future, I would be more than happy to do that. And that's how I've gone about it, is just acknowledging them. And then, you know, mentally just telling myself, I can't allow this one person to bring me down. That's not what I got into this position for. That's not why I ran for office, and I can't allow this one person to their negative comments to hurt me personally. And so, and finding the support system, right? Like whether it's among ourselves or your family or whoever. But unfortunately, you know, using social media, that's the downfall, is having to take those negative public comments. And again, just acknowledging them. It may die out every single time you just say. It could be the same messaging. Thank you for your comment. Thank you for your whatever it is.
That sounds good. Thank you.
You're welcome, Robin.
Anyone else?
I've had a couple of these, and it might help, depending what the issue is, to get on the phone with them, especially in Brigham. We're not a lot of people. Maybe get on the phone with them and just say, hey, okay, here I am. Let's talk about this. And if it's truly that they want to be heard, well, you're catering to them, you're talking to them, and maybe you can talk about those differences, and then maybe they'll refrain from doing that in the future. But that's what I've had to do. And mostly, at least mine have been, as Zach mentioned earlier, nationalizing things, which our municipal government, it's nonpartisan. It's how we get after it. It's how we work. And to have, you know, you're not conservative enough, or you're not this enough, or you're not that enough. Like, come on, that's not what we're about here. And so that conversation on the phone is helpful sometimes.
Thank you.
All right. I've been in city government for 40 years, and a lot of those, and the one person probably outside of my organizations that I've leaned on the most for advice and wisdom has been Mr. Dave Church. And Dave Church is leaving us as our general counsel of the Utah League of Cities and Towns, effective after this meeting. And so, Dave, you have 20 or more little newly elected officials here, and we would love to hear some advice.
All right. I'm assuming that I'm on and unmuted. Just nod if that's right.
You're perfect. Yes.
Good. John didn't warn me in advance of this, so I'm happy to just off the cuff give you some advice for newly elected officials on how I think you can enjoy it more and be more successful in your service to your city. I think the number one thing you should focus on is this: understanding the purpose of local government, and that is that we are a service organization. We're a service corporation. We exist to provide clean water to the people. We exist to take the dirty water away. We exist to provide the fire protection, the police protection. Our primary purpose is, as we used to say, is to make life better. We don't exist necessarily to tell people what they can and can't do in their backyards. That's incidental to what we do. We don't exist primarily to make decisions about land use applications. That's incidental to what we do. The primary purpose for which communities are created is first and foremost to provide services to the group that they can't provide for themselves. I think that's a wonderful thing to be involved in. I think we all should be proud of that. I know I like to say, I've said this on the trainings over the years many times, that I'm proud that I can wake up in the morning in South Jordan and know I can brush my teeth with clean water, that I can put a garbage can out on the street and it disappears, that I could, if an emergency comes up, that I can dial 911 and someone comes to help. South Jordan does that for me. You do that for your communities. That's first and foremost why we exist, and we should focus on that. It's, as they said, nonpartisan, it's apolitical, it's the reason for our being. And if we focus on that primarily, you enjoy community service more. The second reason we exist is to build and preserve the sense of community. Everybody needs a place to be from and a place to go home to. There are lots of places that never incorporated, never became a city, that have disappeared from our lives. There are also lots of places that are available for people to retire to and go home to. And they do that because people like you have preserved that for them, that it is what it is because of them. And that's really where we get into the planning and zoning and those other kind of things. It's not because we want to be regulators. It's because we want to build and preserve a sense of community. We want St. George to remain St. George. We want Panguitch to remain Panguitch. That's the reason why we regulate property. It's not because we want to be in charge. But if you keep those two things in mind, I think that you'll enjoy your service more and you'll have less angst and less controversy. Are there any questions about that? I know John opened his mouth like he was going to comment.
Not me.
But I'm happy to answer any questions you have that you think a retiring lawyer can answer, as long as the newly elected officials are here.
Any questions for Mr. Church? Okay. Well, thank you so much for your attendance. We still have 3 more minutes if anybody has any questions. If not, thank you for your attendance. And
hey, John, let me just add one. Let me just add 2 quick thoughts here. One, thank you, Dave, for those words of wisdom. I was writing them down so that I can continue to carry on those thoughts, even as you are fishing somewhere instead of attending city council meetings going forward. So thank you for that. And again, thank you to all of you for being willing to stick your necks out and run for office. My grandfather was the mayor of a small town in Idaho for 24 years. And as his grandson, it was always awesome to go up there and feel like I was a somebody because my grandpa was the mayor, even when we got pulled over by all 3 police officers in town. My parents were less than thrilled when I, in the back seat, said my grandpa's the mayor. But the point is that you guys, by sticking your necks out and saying, I'm willing to serve, are taking a lot of criticism and taking a lot of heat, and you and your families are going to feel that. And my hope is that over your time as elected officials, you'll feel like you can turn to the league and your colleagues around the state for support, and that when you finish your service, that you can look back and say, my community is a better place because of the time that my family and I committed to making our communities better. So when Dave talked about how really local governments exist to make life better, that's you. You are the ones who are making that positive difference. So thank you very much.
Thank you. And as we leave, let me just add one thing is we just thought that having this group discussion was very, very important for you and for us. And so thank you for your participation, but kind of look around and see whose name's there, and don't be afraid to reach out. You know, I thought the funnest thing I thought about the breakout sessions is the commonality that came out between the decisions, or the commonality and the differences that came out, but how the thought processes, you could rely on one another. And don't be afraid to give one another a call once in a while and just see how things are going. Or if you, one of the things that I loved as a city manager is when I got on the headlines of something crazy happening in my city, I would get calls from other city managers and just saying, hey, I feel your pain. And so don't be afraid to reach out to one another, and you see something good or something bad going on, just go do that. So thank you.
Yeah, I wanted to say thanks to Cameron and to everybody at the Utah League of Cities and Towns. It's been a really difficult thing to put on such a convention, especially virtually. And I look forward to getting to shake everybody's hand next year and say hi, because this has been, it's super helpful to new officials. I think the resources are plentiful, and we're still drinking from a fire hose, but this has been a really good week.
Great. Thank you, Max. All right.
All right.
We have.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.